Welcome to the Art of Medicine, the program that explores the arts, business, and clinical aspects of the practice of medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Wilner. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jennifer Lycette, a practicing oncologist and author of two fiction thrillers. The Algorithm Will See You Now, which I think it's 80% done. And
Oh,
in
all
fact,
right.
I was thinking of canceling this interview so I could finish it, but I thought, well, that's counterproductive. I got to talk to the author, but then I got to go back and find out how it ends. And The Committee Will Kill You Now. I can't wait to talk to Dr. Lycette about her writing. But before we get started, I'd like to thank our sponsor, locumstory.com. Maybe you're curious about locums and how it might fit into your career story. But do you know all the different reasons physicians choose locums and how it works for them? At locumstory.com, you can hear firsthand stories as diverse as physicians themselves. There's not one solution for everyone. The variety of opportunities might surprise you. Locum Story is an unbiased educational resource. It has tools that let you explore trends in your specialty and compare different locums agencies. There's even a simple quiz to see if locums is right for you. Do your own research at locumstory.com. It's easy. All right. And now to my guest, Dr. Jennifer Lycette. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I was really excited. My favorite, you are episode number 107. And my favorite guests are physicians who somehow magically find the time to write. And in your case, you have not one, but two fiction thrillers. I've interviewed several other physician authors, and it's always fun. And as a physician author myself, who's always looking for more time and more things to write about, I want to learn as much as I can about your writing process, how you get it done, how you decide what you're going to write, how you publish it, and then how you manage not to steal too much time from your patients and all those important to you. So we're going to do all that in about 20 minutes. So to get started, tell me a little bit about yourself. What are you doing now?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So, as you said, I'm a practicing hematologist oncologist. I have been a community hematologist oncologist for 17 years. And the past 10 of those years, I have worked in the rural setting in Northwest Oregon. And I actually am one of those physicians that we're hearing more and more about, went through burnout some years ago. I just listened to your it wasn't the last one. I think it was one or two before that with uh I think Gail Gazelle is her name.
Yes,
That was
yes.
a great talk. Um I feel like it's almost cliche now, but I mention it because that is actually where my writing came out of that. So I went through burnout in 2019. So it was actually kind of ironic. It was actually before the pandemic, and I left my practice. I went through a kind of big inner doing a lot of inner work and exploration, and then didn't really know what was going to happen. And then I was 6 months into that, and the pandemic happened. And it was a very strange time because it actually, having been a physician for almost 20 years, it actually felt terrible to be not in medicine when this global crisis was happening. And actually, again, kind of ironically, led to me deciding I wanted to come back and practice. And so, um, to get back to how writing fits into all that, so um, that's when I really started my fiction writing. And I don't have like there isn't one moment I can point to, but I had been doing nonfiction writing and like narrative medicine writing about the art of oncology, and I had had some perspective pieces published, like in Journal of Clinical Oncology, and then I actually had a piece about the difficulty of rural oncology that was published in New England Journal of Medicine, and I had a JAMA oncology piece, and so it, it was kind of like I felt like hitting all these check boxes with my nonfiction writing. And then I started thinking about like wanting to reach a wider, like non-physician audience. And then I got this idea for my first novel, which you mentioned, and that's this one here, which is The Algorithm Will See You Now. And actually started writing that in 2016. And so it was about a 6-year path from the first draft to publication. And I can, tell you a little bit more about that if you would like.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes, that's exactly what I want to learn about. But I just want to emphasize 2016 was a long time ago. And this book just came out last year, right? March 2023, I believe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people don't realize this. Oh, it's just a little book. People who are
Yeah.
not writers do not realize
Yeah.
all the toil that goes into something they might read in a weekend that
Yeah.
took the author, and it's not the physical act of writing that's usually so demanding with a pen or typewriter, right? It's sort of figuring it all out. And as I've been reading this book, I got into it and I said, oh, I know what's going to happen. And, I'm not going to give it all away, but right away it's, oh, typical thriller, this is going to happen. And that's what happened. But then it got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And there were more, it got much more involved. And I said, oh, this is pretty good. I don't know what's going to happen now. So that's what I meant earlier. I was just reading it before I had an hour here before we connected. And I think it's hard to know. I read almost everything digital now, so I can switch back and forth from, this
Yeah.
this phone or the computer or wherever I am. But you don't know how far you have to go. On the
Yeah.
and the
I
EPUB
re-
version, it doesn't tell you how many minutes or pages you got. So I'm
Right.
not sure how close I am to the end. But it definitely reads like someone who didn't start writing yesterday. Were you a writer in high school or in college? Was this part of what your identity? Did you, or you're just a great student and you could write and it wasn't really special to you until it became sort of an anti-burnout passion?
Well, that's such a good question because looking back, I can like see parts of me that were a writer, but I didn't recognize them. And I'm a lifetime avid reader, like a huge bookworm. Like I taught myself to read, my mom says, when I was just like in preschool, and I was always the kid in the corner reading a book,
There you go. Yes.
Um, so I think just years of being a reader, you ingrain story. And I mean, story is so important to human culture because we use story to navigate so much of our lives, and that's why books and movies and everything hold such a big place in our culture. And then, of course, there's the narrative medicine movement, which was also part of my recovery from burnout, like recognizing that sort of this inherent pull to story can help us in our lives and our practice. But like in terms of being a writer, like I actually know I never thought of myself as a writer, but I can look back like in college, undergraduate, like I was, I did the straight science pathway, like biochemistry major, right to medical school. That was my straight pathway. But of course, even as science majors, the colleges required us to take some non-science classes. So I can look back and think about how like I really enjoyed writing essays for like, um, the social studies classes, or I'm too old now, I can't even remember what those classes were. But I remember like sort of this like feeling of resonance when you'd be writing and you'd pull two things together that didn't really seem to have a connection, but you discovered that connection when you were writing. But I just thought that was like really dorky. So I like never told anyone, like I never talked to anyone about it. And I didn't know anyone in my life who was a writer. And so now, like years later, I can look back and be like, oh, that's actually why writers love to write. But I think then because, I went into medical school, and I know you've talked about this with some of your other guests, like, it's so single-minded, so competitive. Everything else goes away. And of course, like you talked about with Gail, then that leads to a burnout, 20 years later. And then it was only like by like kind of stepping away that like this really, like I guess my brain had space for this to like all wake up. Um, but No, I mean, I wish I could say like I hear so many podcasts of like writers saying, "Oh, I wrote my first novel in 10th grade." And like, no, that was not me at all.
Well, I can just tell as I read this that, well, first of all, I'm very impressed that you were writing this. It's all about AI, right? And how AI can be an imperfect way to take care of patients. Let's put it that way. But this was 2016 that you started this. So very
Yeah.
prescient, right? I mean, everybody's talking about AI in medicine. I got a message on my website from a woman in Australia who wrote to me, "Dear Dr. Wilner, my son wants to go into medicine, but I'm concerned that because of AI, it might be a poor choice. What do you
Oh
think?"
dear.
Literally, literally. And I've talked about AI on Kevin Poe's Kevin MD and written about it. I have my own view, which I think is quite similar to yours as I read this book. Algorithms are better than physicians at remembering facts. There's no question about it. You put me up against the status epilepticus algorithm, and the computer's going to get it more accurate than I will, but not the art of medicine. And by some strange coincidence, that is the title of this podcast, The Art of Medicine, because that won't go away. And so I don't think physicians are going to be put out of work by algorithms. But your story's a little bit different. But I was impressed at how well written it is. In fact, I was noticing you describe the character. She sweating between her shoulder blades and crossing her legs, and her ankle was here. And in fact, she just sprained her ankle. That's where I am now. She just sprained her ankle rushing to the hearth. How far am I from the end there? Am I
Oh,
close?
it's
Or is
yeah,
it
it's just leading into the big finale, so you're
the
very
the big
close.
finale? Yeah, okay. But I mean, the structure is, I mean, it's like a Robin Cook, 20, 30 years ago, I was reading Robin, Cook's medical thrillers, and it's reading just,
Yeah.
except the lead character is a woman, which is a little unusual. So is that why Amazon says you're a feminist medical thriller writer? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, I do think I write with feminist themes, and I think just in a broader definition of the word that yeah, my main character is a woman, and then all not all, but most of the supporting characters are also women. And so it's really, you know, yeah, like you said, it's kind of like telling a story like a Robin Cook medical thriller, but doing it through a feminist lens. So it just brings in um some other aspects that maybe wouldn't be there with a uh from the point of view of a male protagonist. So
Well, I was pleased that the men are not all bad. So because
yes.
about halfway through, I realized this. Wait a minute, there's no men here, and then the men
Yeah.
started showing up,
Yeah.
and at least they're not all bad guys. So that was
Yeah.
kind of a relief. So where do you find the time? How do you find the time to write? You are
Yeah.
practicing now, correct?
Yeah, I do practice part-time, which is for many of us like a 0.75 FTE, which, for physicians means, total with like, all the epic work and everything from home is probably still about 50 hours a week, but it's not 70 hours a week. Um, I mostly write on the weekends. I do like Fridays, like today, I don't have clinic. So sometimes I'll get some writing done, but sometimes I'm still catching up from the week. And so sometimes my brain just needs like a day before I can even write. So one of the things, maybe to answer that too, if I could talk a little bit about like what you kind of brought up before, like the path to publication, because part of that was back in 2019. Um, I applied just on a whim. I thought there was no way I would get a spot in this, but I applied to a writing mentorship program called Pitch Wars, which used to be like this big thing on, well, I will call it old Twitter. Um, and one of the kind of ways to get support as a writer is like through online community. And so, and it was actually with my manuscript for The Algorithm Will See You Now, and I got selected. And so that um, connected me with someone in the publishing industry, and it was like a mentorship program. And um, one of the outcomes and like why so many people wanted to apply for the program, I think, is like some people come out of that program with like big publishing deals, or like I know someone in the program, her book got made into a movie on Netflix. And I was not one of those people. Like, unfortunately, I didn't come out with a publishing deal. So our mentorship program ended like right as the pandemic was starting, and I think no publishers wanted a medical thriller. Who wants a medical thriller? So I did actually put it aside for a couple of years and write the next book, which is the prequel, and that's the one that just came out in November. And that one here, that one's called The Committee Will Kill You Now. And so what you mentioned about the male characters in the first book. So this book, the main character is Noah, who's the older mentor character in the first book. So this goes back to the 1990s and tells
Ah, okay.
his story. So you can read them each separate, like you don't have to know that, but it's kind of like it is a prequel. But in any case, like going back to the publishing story, so one of the things I learned through being in this mentorship program and connecting with other writers is that and I think this also like comes from our physician mindset, right? That like for many writers, like writing 1,000 words a day is all they do. Like even people who write full time and do nothing else. And you know, if you write 1,000 words a day, in 2 months you're going to have a good first draft of a novel. And so it's like it's kind of like adjusting your mindset to like just getting a little bit done every day. And for me, I can't do it every day. I always think I'd love to, but usually when I get home from clinic, my mind's too just not in a creative space. So, but on the weekends, you know, I might write a little more than 1,000 words a day. Like I might write 4 or 5,000 words in a weekend. And so then, you know, then in about 3 months, if you stay with that, you can have a draft. And so I think it's like really, I think for us in medicine too, just kind of like adjusting the mindset, like you're not gonna like sit down and just have a book like in a day or two. Like you're gonna have to put a lot of work into it, like a little bit of time over a long period of time. um I don't know, I got off a little bit, I know there, so I hope
No,
that
that's
answered the
great.
question.
I would
Yeah.
say it's
Yeah.
similar to exercise. You know,
Yes.
you can exercise all day long and there's no results, right? But
Yeah.
if you do it 6 days a week for 6 months, well, then you might
Yeah.
actually, see something. Yeah, but it's a whole sort of a glacial development. And of course, you can write 1,000 words one day and tear it up the next. It doesn't necessarily accrue in a linear way. Let me ask you a personal question. What, and you don't have to answer if it's too tough, but what would you say is the most important activity in your life that you have sacrificed so that you can stay home and write on the weekends? What had to go?
You know, it's ironic, but a lot of times, unfortunately, it's exercise.
Okay, there we go. All right.
Like sometimes I feel like I can have one extra thing in my and I know that's not true. Like obviously I could do both. And that's actually my New Year's resolution. I'm trying to like approach it that same way. I'm like, okay, even if I just do 15 minutes a day to start, like that's, in a week, a lot more minutes than if I don't do anything. So I will say though, I am guilty of that. Like I would much rather like just like on a weekend morning, grab my laptop and stay in bed and write than like, get outside and take a walk. So I'm trying to be better about that.
Oh, interesting. So the next character, I assume there's a third. Is there a third book in the works?
Oh, that's a great question. So there is, I am working on my third book. It's not in the same world. I haven't ruled out that I might not come back to these characters and write a third book in the future, and I've already had a few readers ask me about that.
Wow.
But if you read the second book, you'll see, like, I just felt like, for these characters, like I wrapped up their story, so I don't have anything else to say about them right now, but I don't want to give any spoilers for either book.
Well,
So
it doesn't have to be 20, 20 years like NCIS. They don't have to go on forever,
right.
but maybe more exciting to create a new world. And I was just going to suggest that your main character in the third book, that she gets a treadmill.
Yeah.
So that'll connect you to your exercise
Yes.
theme. So how did you find a publisher? What exactly? How did that
Oh,
happen?
great question. Yeah, so just brief background because people who, like you said, aren't writers or aren't familiar might not know, and I certainly didn't know before I started on this path. Um, so there's a couple different pathways to publishing. So one is like with the like what they call the big five publisher, like Random House and all this. Um, to even get your book considered by a big five publisher, you have to be represented by a literary agent. Um, I did try for a long time to get represented by a literary agent, and I don't have representation yet. If there's any agents out there listening to this, I am definitely still looking for that. But it's a very tough process. I think it's actually like harder than even getting into medical school. Like it's this very rigorous process of sending out what's called a query letter, which you have to pitch your entire book in like 3 paragraphs, and you have to do it in a way that sort of conforms to all these standards. And like this could be like a whole hour long talk. I mean, there are people that give talks about how to do this, and it's actually easier to write the whole novel than to do these query letters. So so I tried very hard in that, and coming out of this mentorship program called Pitch Wars, that um, path didn't work out for me, but that was okay because I met um like people who are like my writing support friends, and we all like help read and review each other's stuff, and so that was actually more valuable, I think, in the long run. But so if you can't get into that pathway, then the sort of the other end of the spectrum is you can self-publish. Like anyone can self-publish nowadays on like Kindle ebooks. um but from what I had read, I was really concerned that most people who self-publish really like it'd be very unlikely your book would get noticed. As you know, there's like millions of ebooks on Amazon. So I went the middle route, which is I went with what's called a small press. So these are publishing houses that you don't have to have a literary agent to approach, and they're still selective, but you can approach them directly. So um, and the irony of like what you were saying about the algorithm will see you now is that I started writing that back in 2016, like before the chat GPT era, um, because of what I had seen in oncology with, there was a lot of interest and even attempts, like even back in the like 2000s and 2010s with like IBM Watson. They thought it was just gonna like spit out the oncology diagnoses, and it really did not work out anything like they had thought. And I just became super interested in it, so I'd done a lot of reading about it, and all these things that are now in the public eye because of chat GPT, I just found fascinating, like the fact that AI can quote unquote hallucinate a result. And I just started, that was kind of like where I got my story idea. Like, what if this was actually implemented and nobody, like there was an error that wasn't obvious? And then, of course, in oncology, we deal a lot with statistics and errors. And but the hard thing was like I couldn't convince any publishers that this was interesting. Like they either felt like it was like too far future, or it wasn't relevant, or it was like unrealistic. And then actually the way I approached my publisher, the letter that got me the contract offer was when I don't know if I should talk, you can cut this out if we shouldn't talk about this, but it was when Elon Musk bought Twitter, and everyone started really thinking about algorithms and how people in power can
Hmm.
use algorithms to manipulate society. And so I just on a whim, I wrote this because you still have to query publishers just like literary agents. So
Sure,
I wrote this
sure.
query letter. And it's so funny because all the other letters I wrote, I spent weeks on, but this one I just sort of did on the fly. I was like, oh, if you think like billionaires controlling social media algorithms are bad, what if they controlled our healthcare? And I just like sent it off. And that was it was like suddenly like, because things were in the public eye, like people could understand my book. But for a lot of years, like, yeah, people really didn't understand like what I was trying to say, or they're just like, this would never happen. What are you talking about? AI in medicine doesn't happen. So
Good for
it's been a
you.
really
Good for
interesting
you.
journey from that standpoint.
I have a whole collection of rejection letters from my first novel, and they're all over the place. One of
Oh,
them said, "Oh, this is so good, but we have one that's kind of like it, already, and we
yeah.
already contracted." And then other people are saying it's awful. And then one guy's saying, well, we haven't published anything like this, so we can't because it's too new, everything all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think, unlike medical school, where if you study hard, you're going to, succeed, I think succeeding as a writer and finding a publisher is a lot more hit or miss. And of
Yes.
course, a lot of persistence on your part. So, and I'm glad you did, because I think it's a really great story as I read it, because I read everything very critically, of course, as a writer myself, and it's like, well, I haven't found anything that really needs fixing. So I think you did a great job.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It's funny, like looking back, I mean, because this was my first book, like I'm pretty critical of it, but but it's okay because I feel like the my second book, it's just like I felt like I sort of reached a better level of writing. But then I'm sure like I'll look back at that one. I mean, it's just how we are, right? We're always
That's
just,
right. I don't
you
think
know,
Michelangelo was
self-critical.
pleased
Yeah.
with the Sistine ceiling either. He would have done it differently the second time. So I think artists are just like that. Well, to wrap up, do you have any advice for as someone who's experienced burnout, for physicians who want to write or pursue another, artistic endeavor, dance or painting, but they can't find the time and they're frustrated? Any advice?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I can definitely think of some. The only reason I'm hesitating is I just feel like we're just all in different situations. And so what worked for me might not work for somebody else. Um, and I think again, depending on where you are in your career, like, what for me, mid-career might be different from, someone early career. But, I mean, I guess, and this was something I didn't mention yet, but I've written about it a lot on my blog and like from Medscape and things was about, and this was, I think a few years before it was more in the medical, I was working with a life coach, and I actually found a life coach not through, she didn't work with physicians specifically, but I met her at a writing event. So it was like um, so I found that, personally very helpful because I think if you find the right person to support you, and I think especially like for us that, you know with medicine, like again, a lot of us just, we're so young, we go straight through, undergrad, you know, internship, residency, fellowship, job. I mean, and then I feel like in many ways, like maybe our emotional growth is stunted, and like because we didn't maybe have the same life experience as other people in their 20s. So, um, boy, I'm really rambling here. I'm
Well, I've
sorry.
interviewed I've interviewed Heather Fork, who is a life coach who, and I'm not sure exactly what she calls it, but she specializes in helping physicians who
Yeah.
need help, and she has a lot of experience. And of course, there are others, because sometimes you just need another,
Mhm.
trained, concerned adult that you
Yeah.
can talk to, who
Yeah.
has some experience with these things. White Coat, I think it's the White Coat Crossing is her website.
Yeah.
And, it's when you got a big decision and you need somebody to help you with. Well, it sounds like you managed to get yourself on track. You got 2 novels published, and there's a third in the works, and you're back at work. You're seeing patients.
Mhm.
Um, and just need to kind of figure out a way to exercise, and life will be perfect. Is that right?
Yes, if I could get that exercise back in there, that would be a good thing.
So where can I find your books? Where are they?
Yeah, so you probably the best place to start or the easiest would be just my website, which is jenniferlycette.com/books. But the ebook you can get on Amazon Kindle, and then paperback you can order online anywhere books are sold.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Jennifer Lycette, I want to thank you for joining me on the Art of Medicine.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk with you.
Before we close, I'd like to give another thanks to our sponsor, locumstory.com, a resource where providers can get real, unbiased answers about locum tenens. I'm Dr. Andrew Wilner. See you next time.
This program is hosted, edited, and produced by Andrew Wilner, MD, FACP, FAAN. Guests receive no financial compensation for their appearance on the Art of Medicine. Andrew Wilner, MD, is Associate Professor of Neurology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, Memphis, Tennessee. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this program belong solely to Dr. Wilner and his guests and not necessarily to their employers, organizations, or other group or individual. While this program intends to be informative, it is meant for entertainment purposes only. The Art of Medicine does not offer professional financial, legal, or medical advice. Dr. Wilner and his guests assume no responsibility or liability for any damages, financial or otherwise, that arise in connection with consuming this program's content. Thanks for watching. For more episodes of The Art of Medicine, please subscribe. www.andrewwilner.com